Question number 6 of the PhilNITS FE afternoon portion of the exam. We are now in sub-question number 2. And in this question, we are supposed to figure out what will be the result after modifying the programs with method 1 and 2. Will the first method result to a stable output, and the method 2 will have an unstable output? Of course, there are variations based on the choices that we have here. It could be that both of them are going to be stable, or both of them are going to be unstable, and so on and so forth. And I think we have to remind ourselves what is stable and what is unstable. And if you look at the part here, which we also did in a previous question, when we say stable, that means that if you see a 7 here, the output would put 7 in one of the containers. And if we see another 7, then that should be after the one that we saw first. So for example, the student number for the first one is 11, and the student number for the next one is 20, then 20 should come after 11. And if we see that, then that's supposed to be a stable output. But if it's not like that, where you got the student number that we saw last put in front of the student number that we saw first, then that is classified to be unstable. Okay? So again, it's going to be based on whether we see the score first, and the student number of that person who got that score should come first in our output to be a stable output. Okay? Alright. Now, the way to solve this is to, of course, see what we are changing. In our set of instructions, we were notified that we have to change program step 2, where instead of the for loop having initial value for I as 0 and then going to at least I think in this case until 10. In this case we are going in reverse, where we start at 10 and then until we reach uh, the number beyond 0, which would be negative, right? Because 0 is included in the counting in this case. And when I saw this, I thought that, well, if we're counting in reverse, then it looks like it's gonna be unstable, right? Because you put them in reverse, the positions will be in reverse, right? But then I thought that maybe I should also see what exactly would be the numbers, because sometimes you get this idea, but you don't test it out, and if you don't test it out, you realize later on that the initial thought that you got isn't really the correct output. So what I did was to put in the numbers and see if it will really result to an unstable output. Now in this case, I think that, let me see if I can put here the part where, okay, so we have here the idea that there's a count array and there's an index array, and we are supposed to start from 10, and so we're here. And then if the count bracket I bracket, what that means, if the value of count at 10 is greater than 0, then that's the only time we'll be going inside the conditional statement, right? So whatever's inside the if statement. But because this is 0, then we don't have to go into the inside of the if statement. So we move on to the next number, which is 9. And what we can see is that, well, it's 2, so it's greater than 0. And so we go inside this part, and it's saying that the index at 9 would have the value of n, and we know that the value of n at the start is 0, so that's why we put here the value of 0. Okay, so previously the value was 8, now we're making it 0. Okay, so this part here, this used to be the output, now we're putting a 0 here to show that we're changing it. Okay, and the other thing that we have to do is that once we've put the value of 0 in the index, then we have to do an operation which is an addition. So the count, the value of count at 9 is 2, then we have to add 0 with 2, and that's why we get the 2 here. 0 plus 2 is 2. Now moving on to the next, we got 8, and it's saying that the value of count at 8 is 3, which is greater than 0. And so we go inside the if statement again. And right now the value of n is 2. So we put 2 here for our index. Again, 5 here is supposed to be the previous value when we were doing this set of instructions using the former for loop statement. Okay, so now we're using 2, and again we have to add the value of count at 8, which is 3, with 2, so that's why we get 5. Now we move on to the next. At 7, the value is 2, it's again greater than 0. So we put the value of whatever you have right now for n, which is 5, to the index at 7, which is why it is 5 here. And then the next thing that we need to do is, well, we gotta add the value of count at 7, which is 2, and 5, and that's why we get 7 here. Now the next thing that we need to do is go to the next one, which is 6, and again the value at 6 for count is 1, and that is greater than 0, so we have to put the value of n currently at 7 to index bracket I bracket, which is here, and now this is 7. Okay, and then again, of course, we have to add the value of count at 6, which is 1, and then 7, which gives us 8. Okay, and if we do the rest, we'll have this set of numbers too. Okay, so that's the first part that we have to do. Now the second part would be to find out if the method 1, the first method, would give us a stable or unstable. Okay, so what I did was to put these things in this way, and then the index here, again we have the previous values, but because we've changed them, we put the new ones in such a way that it looks like this. It's going to be like this. Then do we see any patterns, for example, when we put them in this way? Now earlier when I was doing this, I put the unstable set of arrays first, and later on I'll show you that if you attempt to do that, you'll find that the result would be incorrect because you won't be able to match the inputs with the correct outputs at all. And so I thought that, okay, let's try out the stable output because unstable seems to be giving us incorrect answers, incorrect outputs. So in this case, what we need to do is, given the input, for example, we start at 0, and the score is 7, then this 7, we see that it's going to lead us to the index with a value 3, right? Because remember, to get to the index, the value of the index, we have to get the value of n. And it says here that the n is supposed to be index bracket score bracket I bracket bracket. So that means that if the score, and we're starting at 0, um, the score value is 7, then index at 7 will give us this one here, okay? So right now, the value is 5, okay? And if we know that we got 5 here, will we be able to find an output where from 5 we will get a student number that is 11 and a score that is 7? And turns out that from 5 we can reach 11, 7 as well in the sorting, okay? Now, that tells us that we are on the right track. And the next thing that we need to do is to see if the other ones are giving us correct values too, because I remember before there was a sub question where at the start seems to be going okay, but eventually the numbers were telling us that the equation that we're using is incorrect. So that's why maybe at the start looks okay, but eventually if you try out more numbers, it's going to give you incorrect numbers, incorrect output. And so you got to try out if your theory is actually gonna hold true for the rest of the numbers, at least in this case, until we reach the fourth, starting from 0. Now, if the input is right now, right now here, where the index is as 1, and we have student number 12 and score 8, if we attempt to go to the index using the value of 8, we are led to this one, and here we got the value of 2, and what we want to know is if the value of 2 is gonna give us 12 and 8 for the student number, okay? And it seems like it's gonna give us the correct answer too, okay? So from the value of 2, we go to the index 2 here for the output, and it's gonna give us 12, 8 as well. And then we go to the next one, 13 and 5, student number 13 and score 5. If we use the value of 5 for the input for the index, it's gonna lead us here, and the value that we got is 8. Then the 8 here would lead us here, and if it's 8, then the student number should be 13 and the score should be 5, and this is what we also see, okay? So from here we can see that we are being led to the correct numbers, but the thing that we also need to know is, are we getting a stable result? And remember, a stable result would mean that if there are two scores that are the same, will the student numbers still be in correct sequence? If we saw that the score 8 with the student number 12 was the first one that we saw, would we be able to see it in the output? Or will we see another student number that got the 8 as a score first? And in this case, what we see is that because we saw 12 and 8, student number 12 and score 8 first, then we see it here ahead of 15 and 8. Student number 15 and score 8. Because again, both of them got 8 as their scores, but student number 12 was the one that we saw first. And so in the output, it should come first before student number 15, and that's why we can say that we are getting a stable output. Now, if we look at the unstable, just to see that we are not getting the correct numbers at all for that result. When we got the 1419, in this case, it's saying that, well, it's supposed to be here and not here, okay? And if we got 12 and 8 here, it's going to give us another index. And so in that sense, it's not giving us the correct result that we are going for. The other thing that I'd like to add is this part about 2 plus 1 equals 3, because previously when I was working on the other questions, I was wondering what was the point of having to have the plus 1. If you look at the sample code, we have here a part here where you got the assignment to n and then adding a plus 1, right? And so, for example, let me see if I can look at the other set of okay, I think it's this part, okay? Particularly this part where we have the plus 1, okay? I thought that this one is something superfluous, but turns out it's gonna make sense when we explain it. And then, by the way, this one, we don't add this anymore because we are focusing on changing a portion in the previous step 2, and for step 3 we are not gonna use this part at all, but this one where we add a plus 1, it's gonna make sense when we, for example, I think in this case, if we got the same number for the score 8 and 8, and it's saying that, for example, in this case, if it's 8, then it's supposed to be the same value for the index, which is 2, right? But because we got 2 8s already, then how do we differentiate what would be the output, where are we going to go for the output, right? And so that portion of the code we saw a while ago is telling us that if you have been to an 8 before, then you add a plus 1 to the value in the index. So that means that previously it was 2, now we got to add a plus 1, so that makes it 3. And that's why the next 8, which is this one, 15, student number 15, score 8, would be right after the first 8 that we saw, which is 12. Okay, and therefore, if we look at the set of choices, the correct answer would be letter C, and that means that the first method is stable, and the second one is unstable because we know that for the second method, we already did this for G, previous question, and we know that if we look at the numbers, for example, in this case, the 8 is put here, and the second 8, for example, in this case, student number 15 is put before the first one that we saw. Okay, so that means that it's unstable, and therefore method 2 is unstable while the first method is stable.